Good afternoon and welcome to our July 8th, 24 regular meeting of Belleville City Council. The City of Belleville acknowledges we are meeting today on the traditional territory. We recognize and honor the historic relationship of the Indigenous peoples to this land and acknowledge our shared obligation to request, honor, and sustain these lands and the natural resources contained within. We recognize all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit who call Belleville their home and support the need for cultivating a strong relationship with them. We look forward to fostering a path towards reconciliation and show respect for the Indigenous peoples who first lived and currently live on the land where we all reside together. I will call this meeting to order. We are all present except Councillor Chatton, and just remain standing for a moment of reflection from City Clerk Matt McDonald.
May we be worthy custodians of all that has been trusted to us. Help us to be concerned only for what will promote good government. May we bring to our council chamber minds that think and hearts that feel, always having respect for others so that we may serve the people of our city in a helpful manner and for the good of all.
Calling on a disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Noting none. I need a motion for a reading and confirmation of minutes of regular council meeting minutes of June 24th, 24, special council meetings of June 17th, 24, regular in-camera meeting minutes of June 24, 24, and a special in-camera meeting of June 17, 24. Moved by Councillor Kelly, seconded by Councillor Enright Miller. Discussion. All in favor? Carried. Deputation tonight. I see the fire chief. I think he's around somewhere, and I'm going to center him out here. I know we do a lot of these medals and fire services, and on behalf of council, I want to congratulate you, Chief Smith. And tonight is the night that you receive your exemplary medal in recognition of your 20 years of loyal service to the public safety of Canada. And Dan, I want to thank you from all of us in the city, and we have a presentation here for you. We even framed it, but it's on your budget. Congratulations. Did you want to speak, Chief? I guess you're going to speak a lot tonight, so we'll leave it at that. So, yeah. Resolution to have the presentation received, moved by Councillor Alsop and seconded by Councillor Enright Miller. All in favor? Carried. We next have Jennifer Lyons, Manager of the Museum Services, representing Glanmore Advisory Committee to make a deputation. Jennifer, welcome to Council.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, councillors, for this opportunity. The Glanmore Advisory Committee requested that we put together a presentation to review the role of museum services within the corporation, within the culture sector within the city, and within the community as a whole. We are looking at achievements, but also challenges faced by the museum system, and also next steps. When we talk about the culture sector, these organizations and activities come to mind, and of course museums and historic sites feature amongst the cultural players in a community. At a macro level, as indicated by the Creative City Network of Canada, culture is also the sense of place that fosters community identity and pride and a feeling of quality of life for where you live. It's also a catalyst for urban development, renewal, and revitalization. And it also serves as branding that attracts jobs, residents, and businesses. We also know that cultural tourism has an immense impact on local economies. These are some stats shared from the Ontario Arts Council in a report that was put out in 2023, and it looked at essentially the economic impact of cultural tourism. And we can see that although cultural tourists account for about 13% of tourism in the province, spending is at 30% of all tourist dollars in Ontario. That means that the benefit from investing in culture goes beyond artists and art organizations, but to local businesses and the economy as a whole. Culture as a standalone municipal service has been growing in profile in Canada since the 1970s. Obviously, there are a lot of different departments that contribute to local culture. But for the City of Belleville, the official portfolio falls within community services and centers on the operations right now on archives and museum services. Museum services means different things to different people, depending on their age, interests, or relationship to Belleville. And that is true of Glanmore National Historic Site as the sole municipally operated museum in Belleville. First and foremost, most people think of us as a tourist attraction, and we're certainly in the top tier of attractions in the city. But there's another element of the community that sees the social benefit of attending educational programs, special events, guest speakers, and also an element of the community that likes to volunteer their time. There's also teachers and students that see the value of curriculum-based programming that we offer at Glanmore. And there are researchers, collectors, hobbyists that place value on our status as a community repository, seeing the intrinsic value of the collections we hold on behalf of the city. Earlier this year, the Ontario Museum Association put out a number of interesting statistics. And essentially, they show that museums are important community infrastructure. They give people a sense of belonging and membership in a community, and the majority of Canadians feel that museums are a place to learn about the history of the community in which they live. We have a small museum services team, and our work is subdivided into these 6 areas: collection stewardship and care, digitization and data management, exhibition and outreach, communications and marketing, public programming and visitor services, site and asset maintenance. And we are supported in this work by a great group of volunteers. We have our Friends of Glanmore group, which is a registered charity in Canada. We also have our Glanmore Advisory Committee, which advises on policy and museum issues. In the package received ahead of this meeting, you will see recent highlights during this term of council, in fact. All of these bullet points are things that have happened in the last year or two. And a couple to make particular note of is in 2023, we saw our highest visitation rate of the past 10 years. We also have been plugging away at making continuous site improvements at Glanmore for both maintenance and accessibility. We have had a growing profile in media, both our own social media efforts with over 250,000 followers on one of our platforms alone, and also filming projects that have occurred on site. Our collections are our greatest assets in museum services, but they also present some of the greatest challenges. We have approximately 30,000 artifacts that we house at Glanmore National Historic Site. This is subdivided into 3 distinct collections. The images on this screen show items from our Cooldery collection, which by and large furnishes Glanmore National Historic Site. When you walk in the doors and you go through the rooms, you are looking at the Cooldery collection by and large. We have a much smaller collection, but very important collection, and that is the Phillips Burroughs Faulkner collection, which is linked to the 4 generations of the family that called Glanmore home. In 2023, we had correspondence with Anne Faulkner, who is the little girl in the center photograph with the bow in her hair. Unfortunately, Anne passed away last September. But in the months and weeks leading up to her passing, we had many conversations about how we could fulfill her final wish, which was to return all of her remaining heirlooms and objects connected to the history of her family and to Glanmore itself back to the city of Belleville. So in September, the same month that Anne passed, we received numerous boxes shipped from British Columbia, hundreds of objects, very precious objects connected to the history of the house, the family. It also had artworks attributed to Anne's late mother, Philippa Faulkner, who was a renowned mid-century artist, and amazing archival documents and photographs. We had no space to process this collection, and so we had to take over a gallery in the museum to do so. Our third collection is the regional collection, which speaks to the larger history of Belleville, and it is kept largely in storage in the attic space at Glanmore. There are some exceptions. We have a permanent exhibit at Fire Station Number 1 on the history of firefighting in Belleville. We also, when appropriate, will take items from the regional collection if they fit the time period of Glanmore and put them on display in the house, such as this lovely china set that belonged to Sir Mackenzie Bole, our 5th Prime Minister of Canada, gifted to him from Queen Victoria. Because a lot of the regional collection is in storage, we prioritize our online collections, and we are continuously adding to our database, which is searchable for the public. But our attic space is quite full. I would say it's at capacity. And that means we have to be quite restrictive in terms of what we accept into the collection at this point. Of course, exceptions are occasionally made, like the Belleville General Hospital reaching out to us in 2022 and again in 2023 to donate a large collection related to the history of the hospital and the medical practitioners there. We could not house this at Glanmore. We have taken steps to rent space at the community archives as a stopgap measure. Collections like that from Belleville General Hospital show that Belleville has a very big story to tell. These are some of the thematic areas that we wish we could explore more, but don't always fit within the confines of Glanmore National Historic Site. Again, these photos speak to some of the space issues. The boxes in the top left corner is very representative of what our attic space looks like at Glanmore. It's quite dense in terms of the artifacts we have there. A recent visit from the Canadian Conservation Institute suggested that we should be looking at lessening the density of that particular storage space. We also have to be very mindful about the kinds of programs and events we do. If we are seating more than 25 people, it has to be an outdoor event and is then dependent on weather. We also have very unique workstations for our staff. Our museum administrative and collections assistant works in the former pantry at Glanmore, and our museum technician has the workstation in a storage supply area. One particular room at Glanmore, the breakfast room, really exemplifies how we are juggling museum activities. Because it is the only flexible and accessible space in the museum, it's in demand. So it's the space that we use for programming, for guest speakers, for meetings, for visiting exhibitions from other institutions. You saw earlier we used it to process a new acquisition, and it's also the mobilization area if we have a filming project on site. But it can only be one of these things at a time, and so coordinating the various museum activities have to take that into consideration. In 2019, Council approved in principle Glanmore's strategic plan. Unfortunately, that was followed closely by the pandemic, which meant that a lot of the initiatives were not able to be realized during that time frame. In 2024, the advisory committee requested a refresh, and that they approved it earlier this year. Both the strategic plan and the refresh document really looks at one keystone recommendation, which is a museum needs feasibility study, a way to go forward for from some of the challenges that we have. This study was initiated late last year. The report was finalized in June, and it went to our Glenmore Advisory Committee at their meeting that month. It will be coming forward to Council next month, accompanied by a staff report. So the museum needs feasibility study, it does deal with space first and foremost, but really we wanted a very fulsome and holistic look at how we could improve museum services for the City of Belleville. We engaged Lord Cultural Resources. They have an international reputation in this field with more than 2,700 museum planning projects specifically. These have occurred in over 64 countries around the world and in 485 cities. And really this process we see as equivalent to any master planning exercise undertaken by the city, similar to that taken for parklands and recreation, waterfront. And the question is, do we continue to struggle with our current limitations, or do we put a plan in place to help us navigate the next 5, 10, 20 years? So next month we will deliver the feasibility study to Council to help further shape that road mapping and to be considered alongside all of Council's priorities. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, and the building looks good in the slides. Are there any questions at all? Seeing none, I need a motion to receive. Councillor Alsop, Councillor Wright Miller, all in favor, carried. Great presentation. And you know the museum is the only place they won't give me the key to because they're afraid of I'm in love with a lot of the artwork there. So now I need a motion that we go into committee of the whole with hear reports and considering passing recommendations and resolutions with Councillor Kelly in the chair. Moved by Councillor Enright Miller, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All in favor, carried.
All right, thank you, Mayor. We'll move into reports. The agenda shall include under report items that warrant individual attention from Council. 8A1, Development Guidelines and Manual Approval, City of Belleville, APS 2024-40, Development Guidelines and Manual Approval. Resolution 1, that report number APS 2024-40, dated July 8, 2024, regarding development guidelines and manual file number DS12, City of Belleville, be received as information. 2, that City Council approve the development guidelines and manual. Number 3, resolution, the Council delegate minor updates to the development guidelines and manual to the Director of Engineering and Development Services. And number 4, that the development manual replace the existing 1998 subdivision specifications and 2005 site plan manual. Can I get a mover? Councillor Carr, seconder, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? Councillor Carr.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to thank staff for the work they've done on this. You know, over the years, we've heard from particularly the building industry that the City of Belleville was difficult to deal with, that there was lots of miscommunication, and here over the last number of years, with the leadership of Director Ashton, we've got a new official plan, we've got a new zoning bylaw, and we've got modern documentation now to assist the building industry and those that are taking on different projects in our city with guidelines that are very clear and articulate in order to assist them in the timeliness of applications. And I think that's the key point, is that we can move these applications on. So I just want to say thank you to staff for the good work here.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Any other comments? Call for the vote. All those in favor? Approved. Next is 8A2 Village Drive Sidewalk. Resolution that the 2024 capital budget be amended to defer capital project 2024 1035 Village Drive Sidewalk construction until recommendations are brought forward with the sidewalk strategy to develop as part of the Transportation Master Plan 10-year review, and that staff report back to the Transportation Committee and Council with a warrant analysis on the installation of three-way intersections in the absence of a sidewalk on Village Drive. Can we get a mover? Councillor Enright Miller, seconded by Councillor Millet. Any discussion? All those in favor? Approved. I am. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you. 8A3 Belleville Caribbean Festival, that pursuant to the Rentals and Booking Supervisors Report, number RBS 2024-03, City Council declares the Belleville Caribbean Festival a municipally significant event in order to assist the Belleville Caribbean Carnival Committee in its application for a special occasion permit for the sale and/or service of alcoholic beverages in connection with its event dated Saturday, August 17th, 2024. Can we get a mover? Councillor Alsop, seconded by Councillor Millet. Any discussion? Councillor Millet.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to, I guess, anybody who could answer my question on staff. Where will this alcohol be served, and is it at Zwick's or is it downtown? I know this festival has a parade involved, and it will be moving through the area. So, anybody?
I can speak to that, but somebody else will have to come here. Is that fair? No, yeah, just go ahead. All right, thank you, Mayor. Through you, Councillor Millet just answered your questions. I'm co-chair of this Caribbean Festival. The beer gardens will be right across from City Hall in that vacant parking lot. It'll be fenced, security. It's all looked after, and it's a 3-day festival. Friday it's West Wicks, Saturday downtown, and then Sunday across from City Hall as well. So does that answer your question?
Yes.
It opens at 2 o'clock, closes at 10.
Sounds like a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on that? Can we call for a vote? All those in favor? Councillor Alsop, Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Approved. Thank you. I think I did ask for a mover. Thank you. Ignore the last two. All right, 8A4, Fire Master Plan 2024 resolution that pursuant to the Director of Fire and Emergency Services Fire Chief's Report number FES 2024-02, Fire Master Plan 2024, the Fire Master Plan be approved, and that the Fire Chief's recommendations be approved for implementation. Can we get a mover? Councillor Thompson, seconder. Councillor Alsop. Any discussion? Councillor Thompson, you're up.
Thank you. I'm moving this one because I feel it's important to finally get this fire master plan in our community. I'm not going to speak a long time on it. I think most of it's in the fire master plan, and I'm just asking for the support of the councillors around this table. I know there's some may not be supportive, and that's great, but I need for the councillors to at least take a look at this report. I want to thank the Chief Smith and all the urban and rural firefighters for here today to show the support for this plan which we've been waiting on for some time. We are here to provide safety to the people, and sometimes that safety incurs cost. Just like when we put house insurance on, that cost. When we put equipment in our cars, it costs money. Safety, and if we don't provide safety in our community, then our council is not doing the due diligence to our community. The rural area that we're talking about has climbed incrementally on the number of homes that are out there. And I asked the councillors that do live in town, would you, there are people that are out there, rather, sorry, in the rural area, with the closeness of houses today, and I don't want to take anything away from the volunteer firefighters, remember that, because they do a wonderful job. But when we're looking at an opportunity for a house that are $700,000, $800,000, $1 million house up for on fire, and we need firefighters responding the quickest they can with the proper equipment they have to save that house maybe beside them, and that's really what we need to do. We're going to be saving lives, not only the house, but we're going to be saving lives. And that's what we got to look for. And I don't like a tax increase any more than anybody else. But when it comes to safety, lives, children, whatever it may be, we can't afford not to. I got 2 or 3 questions I'd like to ask the chief, if he doesn't mind. And the first one is, are both unions on board with this plan?
Through the chair to Councillor Thompson. I think I'll answer this in a few ways, and I'm going to refer to some notes. But I think before I do that, I think we can see from the room that's filled, they're both in support. I mean, when you look around the room, they're not all in uniforms, but for the ones that are, for those of you that don't know all of our firefighters personally, there's a mix out there. There's volunteers here, there's full-time members here. They're sitting side by side out there. They're in support of this. So if I could make a couple of comments. You know, is there union buy-in? And when I say union, I mean both associations. Yeah, there is. And we've worked really hard to get there. Our management team over the last year has been pushing extremely hard to mend a lot of broken bridges. And we're doing that. And we've done that through open lines of communication, and that's with both associations. And that goes beyond just the representatives within the stations. Within CLAC, they've got a provincial representative as well. Just this past Thursday, I was on the phone with her again. We have open lines of communication. If there's ever questions or concerns, it's a phone call away. It's a meeting. As we worked through this master plan, we actually sat both associations down together, their representatives, to review it, so they both heard it the same way at the same time and could share their opinions as a group together. Other things that we've done for union buy-in in this, and do they support it? Yeah, they absolutely do. We're doing things like the joint training. Our full-time members, we've recently implemented the platoon chiefs. That was one of the recommendations here. Our platoon chiefs are going out on regular training nights so they can get to know each other, so they can value each other's work, understand each other's capabilities. So we're really building on that in order to get that buy-in of this plan.
Okay, and another question, if I may.
Sure,
please.
go ahead.
Got a couple more, and then and I'll let other ones speak. Right now, do we have people paying for rural firefighters' response, but are receiving full-time response?
Through the chair to Councillor Thompson. So in the northern subdivisions within the urban-rural split area, we do have residents that are currently paying rural taxes, however, receiving full-time resources or a full-time response. Right now, there's approximately 970 properties that are paying rural tax for an urban response. And if there's anything else, any questions related to the taxation, I would have Director Ferguson add.
And, you know, when you talked about the integrating the both fire departments into one, you've answered that. So the last question I have right now, and I may have a couple of questions when, as I get to speak last. What is the closest rural station to the heart of the development that can get to a response, and can the urban people get there quicker? I'm talking about in the highly dense, you know, we built a lot of houses out there. It's become very dense. So can we get rural firefighters, and again, I'm not taking anything away from the rural firefighters because we couldn't be without them. Can they get there quicker than urban in a serious fire?
So that answer I can explain. It's going to take a little bit to get there. So what we look at is not just response times. We look at effective response. So on any given day, we never know what volunteers are available. So if there was a call in that area today, we do have some volunteers that are close to Station 4. Station 4, sorry, to answer your question, is our closest, the one on Harmony Road. If they're available and can respond and they are home, they may be able to beat the urban resources. That would be with 1 or 2 individuals on board on the truck. That is not an effective response force. 90% of the time, we have about 1 to 2 persons on the first arriving pumper from Station 4. I can tell you, that's a scary thing to do when you're showing up by yourself. One of those volunteers is in the room today. I won't single that person out, but regularly will respond alone. And when they show up alone, they need additional resources. So the next closest station urban-wise, it would depend on exactly where and which subdivision they were going to. But for the most part, it would either be stations 1 or 2. It just, again, it depends on the exact location. And we're looking at about a 6-minute response time to that area, 4 to 6 minutes. They're showing up with resources readily available to start work immediately with that effective response force.
Okay, thank you. I'll table the rest of them until at the end, and I got a couple more at the end. Chair?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. First, I would like to extend my thanks to the Chief and the members of the Belleville Emergency and Fire Services for the time and the work that's gone into this fire master plan. It's not lost on me that we've been without an updated fire master plan for a very long time, and particularly during a period of considerable growth for our city. When the fire master plan was initially presented to council in camera, Ward 2 councillors acknowledged there was a safety risk north of the 401 related to service response time and the ability to have fire apparatus immediately available. With safety top of mind, I put a motion on the floor to immediately approve recommendation number 7 to establish a 3rd engine company and by increasing career staff by 16 firefighter positions, while further review and public consultation could occur. The purpose of the 3rd pumper and team would result in a full company to attend anytime, anywhere in the city, and would and I quote, to increase the ability to manage coincidental and sequential emergencies and to bolster the rural area's response time and effective response force challenges. As the chief has indicated, when a major event occurs, he would dispatch whatever resources were needed through a coincidental response. So my question remains, given Ward 2 councillors have initiated advancing recommendation number 7 to mitigate this risk, across the city I might add, then why is the boundary change even necessary? That is a question I had hoped that Protective Services Committee could delve into, and the fact that the committee was not afforded the opportunity to review either the public input, including the feedback received during a Ward 2 town hall, in writing, I might add, including that feedback, or to discuss the types of questions I find disconcerting. As an aside, I also find it somewhat disingenuous to suggest that because my motion requested that post-public consultation be brought back to council for endorsement and approval meant overstepping the committee process was not my intent, and I take exception to it being suggested otherwise. If you look carefully at the Fire Master Plan, there are numerous references to issues and concerns regarding the volunteer rural fire service related to recruitment and retention. Page 48, 49, 50, 51, 52 as a start. Yet the list of recommendations that we received are silent on any action to address these concerns. I did raise my concerns with the fire chief. However, nothing has changed in the report that we've received today. Volunteer firefighters have a long and trusted history of valued service to our community. So while I respect that considerable effort on the part of the consultants and the fire service staff has gone into preparing this report, respectfully, I think the absence of any recommendations to address volunteer retention and recruitment would signal that they are not worthy of attention. This too could have been addressed with more in-depth conversation post-public consultation by the Protective Services Committee before it was presented to council. As someone shared with me on Saturday, master plans are a roadmap, and what is included and approved is a decision of council. Given that there's nothing in the current version of the FMP, I suggest that there is a gap. Are we as a council prepared to encourage a master plan that only addresses a part of our fire service? Another concern I have is related to the potential taxation impacts the fire master plan in its entirety will have in the coming years. Today's report makes mention of one recommendation, and that is the boundary changes and the financial effect on Ward 1, a slight decrease of 1.25%, and Ward 2, an increase of anywhere from 5 to 8%. Why only this recommendation in the report? Regrettably, the remaining tax implications were buried, my word, in an appendix. I question why this one recommendation only has been highlighted in the financial section of today's report, therefore suggesting it could be a done deal and not highlighting the total projected taxation impact, 4.98 by my calculations, for consideration. I mean no disrespect to our staff, and I appreciate the entire financial picture, if even only in an appendix, and knowing how hard that everyone worked diligently to get those numbers captured. But the question is, why wasn't it addressed that arrived before council today? As these concerns and others, I have a question about the wording for today's motion. The motion is worded, the fire master plan be approved, because I'm not reading the entire motion. The fire master plan be approved, and that the fire chief's recommendations be approved for implementation. Currently, the recommendations in today's report represent all the known impacts, expenses, and taxation associated with fire master plan. So my first question is for clarification. Does this mean we are pre-approving the expenses provided in the appendix and in the report and the taxation effect that goes with it, including the $14 million in capital for Station 2 and an unknown amount for Station 4? Are we pre-approving these expenses?
Who would you like to answer that question for you?
Whomever can answer the question.
And do you want Mr. Ferguson? Thank you.
Absolutely. Through the chair to Councillor Brown, this would not constitute budget pre-approvals. Similar to other master plans, it does lay out the projected expenditures or plan that would be laid in front of council. Each budget year would come with its own operating and capital approval. It would be used as a roadmap. There is still further analysis or high-level breakdowns for capital that would be included in 10-year capital planning approvals as well that would go through council as well.
Thank you. So my next question is, and maybe more hypothetical, but do we as council thoroughly understand the total taxation impact that we're approving today? With respect, I've talked with our Director of Finance about this. We received a report today that was about 243 pages long, and the appendix that outlined all of those expenses was 243, I recall, the very last page. So I am concerned that we are bringing this forward, and hence why I had asked our city clerk to actually print a report for us, because it was difficult to read on an iPad screen. My next question, and I guess I pose this to our fire chief, if I may. What, if anything, is going to be done to address the volunteer fire service and recruitment and retention issues, and over what timeline?
If we could just, Chief, get you to speak into the microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Through the chair to Councillor Brown. Recruitment and retention is high on our priority list. It's something that we work on all the time. We're working extremely close with our representatives from CLAC. We work extremely close with our volunteers as well on how we do that. We recognize that we have challenges within the recruitment side of the house, and I kind of split them in two. So the challenges within recruitment, it's all about getting the message out there, and we've done a lot to do that. Last year, we put forward a an amazing social media video that our communications team put forth. We received awesome feedback from that. Last year, we received 50 applications. That's a huge influx for us for volunteers. We are on the cusp of rolling out another recruitment very shortly. We're working with our HR department, and we're almost there, ready to release that. Retention is a secondary piece, and they truly are, in some cases, hand in hand. In some communities within ours, it is a little bit different. Rural Ontario, small town Ontario, retention is a little different. We have people that stay for long periods of time. Here, we don't have that. Our average years of service right now are in the ballpark of about 2.5 years. So yeah, we do absolutely have a retention issue here. Some of the things that go hand in hand with that, and when we talk about retention, we talk about the ability for volunteers to respond. And our volunteers that are in the crowd tonight, they've heard me talk about this before, and it is no discredit to any of them. They do the absolute best that they can. It is a real challenge for employers to allow people to leave. We have local industry that does not allow their employees to leave. We have local industry that has to shut down their production lines if they go below their minimum staffing requirements. It's becoming harder and harder. As this council has heard many times over, the job force out in the public, it's becoming harder and harder for employers to get people to come to work. So when they lock down an employee that they can count on day to day, they struggle with allowing them to leave to be a volunteer. So we struggle with that piece, and we're building on it. We reach out whenever one of our volunteers, whenever they start, we offer them. If it means something for us to talk to your employer, we will do that. I have personally wrote letters to employers talking about the value of being a volunteer and being able to give back to the community as well. But at the end of the day, it's something that reflects back on the employer and their availability. The other piece to it is life becomes busier and busier and busier. And at the end of the day, they're not on a fixed schedule, and it's based on their availability. So if they have a family, are they at the hockey rink? Are they away on vacation and things of that matter? Certification is another huge piece that comes with retention as well. It's not easy. So there's things that we're trying to do to lessen that burden. So within within certification, it's coming. By 2026, our firefighters have to be certified. And it's not just one course, it's many, many courses that they'll be required to have, whether they're full-time or volunteer. So we're looking at how we can make it a little bit easier for our volunteers to achieve that, because at the end of the day, they're using their personal time outside of their 9-to-5 job or whatever job they do outside of here, and taking them away from their family time as well. So historically, the fire service would send people away. So whether it be locally to the training tower in Trenton or to the fire college in Gravenhurst, courses were few and far between, and that would be a week or 2 weeks at a time away from their families. And that would be vacation time they'd have to use as well. So that's going home and saying to their husband or wife or significant other, listen, I know that I've got 2 weeks of vacation, but I need one of it for the fire department. And that's a difficult thing to ask. So what we're doing now to help with that and hopefully improve retention is we're trying to do as much of that training for our volunteers in-house. So we are doing everything we can to try and lessen the burden of their time away from work and family. But it's still a big ask. There's still a big time commitment to it. So those are some of the things that we are working on.
So my last point, if I may, I think given these concerns and others, I think the fact that it was never my intent to overstep the Protective Services Committee, including the fire chief. I move that we table this report and send it back to Protective Services Committee for review and discussion.
Can we get a seconder for that?
I'll second it and request a recorded vote, please.
There's been a request for a recorded vote on the motion to table it in August. Is that when you said?
I just asked for it to be tabled and sent back
Tabled
to
to-
Protective
okay.
Services.
So recorded vote, we'll start with Councillor Thompson. Oh, sorry, you.
Counselor Carr,
Yes.
Counselor Enright Miller,
No.
Counselor Kelly,
No.
Counselor Millet,
No.
Counselor Thompson,
No.
Counselor Alsop,
No.
Counselor Brown? Yes. Mayor Ellis?
No.
Motion fails.
All right, any other discussion then on, oh, Counselor, on the main motion, Counselor Millet.
We're back to, and that's, I would have preferred to wait till the end for a tabling motion, but I have questions. And my first question is for, I guess, Mr. Ferguson, through you, Chair. None of these recommendations or these, any that have financial implications are happening before we retire for budget deliberations. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Millet, any decisions on a financial nature will be made at budget, and the tax bylaws will be brought forward accordingly, including any potential impacts for a phase-in that may result from the approval of the fire master plan.
That's my point, because on in the annals of the report, it shows rollout over 5 years, I believe it is, on the report. And I'm sure there's some sentiment to see if we can lessen the impact by rolling it out over further, but we can deal with that, so it's happening at budget for tax implications.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Millet. Yes, any additional impacts, and you will note in Appendix 3, it does outline any items that have actually already been completed and items that are for the future consideration, so they would be brought forward at budget time.
Okay. And thank you. If I may, Chair, I have one question, maybe two, depending on time. For the Chief, Chief Smith, you've recommended the urban boundaries expand north. Can you explain that? It seems to be the bone of contention here tonight among my colleagues who are concerned about the tax impact for Ward 2 residents.
Through the chair, yeah, I can absolutely speak a little bit about that. Maybe just for a little bit of clarification, so you want to know a little bit about that area specifics?
If you could put it in layman's terms, what that, we don't all have the benefit of the chart or the mapping. Just explain how that would work, and who would address which calls, that sort of thing, so.
Absolutely, and thank you. So basically what we're looking at is, and from the boundary maps that you have within the report, there's a pink highlighted area to the north end of that map, and that describes the proposed boundary expansion. And what falls within that area is basically the rest of the subdivisions that are up there. It's the hydranted areas, it's the built-up areas. And one of the things I think I can do to help elaborate why we're going this route and what kind of makes it in our mind an urban area, kind of outside of our engineering department's planning realm. From a fire perspective, why we consider it to be urban and why we're looking to expand that boundary. Just for a little bit of information, when you think of an urban built-up city, or you look at rural Ontario or small-town rural Ontario, it can be drastically different. So in here we have approximately 670 homes. We have 75 multi-residential units, and this is just in the proposed area. This is not the subdivisions as a whole. So when I give you these numbers, this is just in the proposed area, so it's obviously much bigger. So again, 670 single-family homes, 75 multi-residentials. Within the single-family dwellings, there's actually 32 that have a garage loft. So we've got a couple of areas where there's the house at the front, there's a laneway in behind with a detached garage and a loft above. That's a very much urban design. Spatial separation is another reason behind this. The homes are very close. As you've seen in the news across the province, there have been fires in these tight residential areas. Fire moves quickly, and again, it doesn't take anything away from our volunteers at all, but it has to go back to arriving on scene as quickly as possible to try and mitigate that risk. When we look at the population density as well, I've spoken within our engineering department and tried to wrap my head around a little bit. When I look at density, I look at the population that's up there, the footprint that's up there, and then I reference back to our NFPA standards. And our NFPA standards, although they're not adopted, it is kind of that gospel that the fire service and what we use. And it puts those subdivisions, and all of the subdivisions in the north, they fall under an urban response boundary within those recommendations of the NFPA. And what that calls for, and in some of them it's either urban or suburban, and in most cases it's urban. That's 15 personnel on scene within 9 minutes, 90% of the time. Within the suburban area, that's 10 staff within 10 minutes, 80% of the time. So when I go back to the question that I was asked earlier, and I talked about how many volunteers are responding on trucks, and you've got 1 or 2 on that first in pumper, if it's there within the 10 minutes or the 9 minutes, that's fantastic, but it still doesn't have that effective response force, and it's still not enough personnel to get to work safely. And honestly, at the end of the day, as much as I've brought this report forward to protect the public, I'm also doing it to protect our staff. Hopefully that answers what you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you. And one last question then. What would be the impact of delaying the endorsement of this master plan tonight?
Through the chair to Councillor Millette, it's the risk that council would be accepting. So I've discussed this with council already. Some of you have asked me this as well on the side. It ultimately is on council to determine if the risk is acceptable. And when I say that, it's the risk of the public, and it is the risk of the men and women that are right here in the gallery today. I do my job to protect the public. I do my job to protect the staff, and I do it because I believe it's what's right. So when we talk about what happens if we don't do this, we're going to have a delayed response, no different than what we have had in the past. We've already had the third pumper approved. That is in there, and absolutely we'll be able to get 4 people there in the new year. That truck will roll, we'll get it there. But that still does not cover the 15 staff in an urban area that we require in 9 minutes. So we ultimately would still then have to call in more additional resources. I cannot guarantee that if I send 4 full-time staff right away, that I will get that additional 5 within 9 minutes from our volunteer catchment. Some days I will, some days I will not. And that, at the end of the day, is a risk that council has to determine whether they can accept or not.
Thank you, Councillor Millette. Mayor Neil Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. And through the Chair, I think most of my questions are going to be to Director Ferguson, the Treasurer. First question, Chief, you mentioned 970 homes that are receiving full-time service, and they're not paying for that. They're paying for volunteer services. So my question to the Treasurer, who is paying for that, for them to receive full-time service?
Through the chair to Mayor Ellis, the urban taxpayer would be paying for the urban tax levy, so they would be covering.
So what you're saying is Ward 1 is subsidizing Ward 2 for those 970 homes?
Through the chair, the tax levy for the urban fire service is paid for through the tax table for Belleville Urban and Canafton Urban, so it would be those 2 tax tables that would be paying.
Okay, thank you. Next question. We did an asset management plan, I think it was maybe a month ago, and you were heavily involved in it. And I believe it said about 7% of our assets were in very poor condition.
Through the chair to Mayor Ellis, that would be accurate.
Okay, and I think looking at some services and surveys that we've had, the public want our assets to be fixed, and that's part of asset management. And I believe that we look at this fire master plan, and it recommends 2 fire halls, one on West Moira Street that is in probably the 7% percentile of assets that need to be fixed, and the other is the Harmony Fire Station, which would, I believe, is in that 7% also. So on a perfect case scenario saying that we didn't pass this fire master plan and stayed status quo, wouldn't our asset management plan require us to look at those 2 halls? And did we not pass the asset management plan?
Through the chair to Mayor Ellis, that would be correct. So we will be doing capital budget as well as 10-year capital plan, which is predicated on asset management plan, which has been approved by council. Station 2 and Station 4 would be assets within those plans that need to be addressed from an asset management perspective, irrespective of the fire master plan.
So I'm just in procedure-wise, maybe I'm a little fuzzy on this. So if we pass that in the asset management plan and we don't pass the fire master plan, regardless, we're going to have to spend approximately $30 million over whether it's 5 years or 10 years to fix those 7%, those fire halls that are in that asset management plan.
Through the chair to Mayor Ellis, that's correct. Over the course of the 10-year capital plan, we will likely need to be addressing those fire stations that are identified in the plan.
So, having said that, what is the biggest capital project or taxation affecting in this fire master plan? Would it be safe to say those 2 fire halls?
Through the chair to Mayor Ellis, yes, the larger expenditure items identified in the recommendations within the fire master plan are associated with those capital expenditures for the 2 stations.
So regardless, we got to do something with those stations.
That's accurate.
Okay, I guess my next question would be the implications of moving forward on what we are passing tonight for the remapping and the rejigging of the response. You had some figures, I believe, what the tax implication would be on that decision if that was passed, and I believe over 5 years it was around $7 a month to give those people full-time service.
Through the chair to Mayor Ellis, so for the existing phase-in strategy, it's probably about $5.60 a month for the Campton rural to urban section that would be moving, and that would be similar on a 5-year phase-in for each year.
Okay, I guess my next question would be probably one last one to our director here. Our master plans, are they new to City Hall, or do we do master plans for parks, for cycling trails and things like that? And what is a master plan? Why do we do them if we do them for other things also?
Through the chair to His Worship, certainly master plans are not new to the city, and council in their short time in office has seen a couple of them. We have a Parks and Rec master plan, and we have a transportation master plan, many others. Those plans are used to identify where we're going with the particular service, and of course it always lays out what some costs would be anticipated going forward to get to the level that's recommended within that plan. So they're a tool that most municipalities use to try and forward plan the services that they provide.
Okay, thank you for that answer, and I'll go back to the treasurer on this one. Who ultimately approves capital and operating budgets?
Through the chair to Mayor Ellis, it's council would approve the capital and operating budget.
So I guess I go back to we did a cycling master plan or transportation plan about 12 or 14 years ago when I was mayor, and I think it came in at around $30 million. I look at that and it's been 14 years, and I think what's come to council and was part of my council that put the Loyalist Cycling Trail in, and there's been a bit of active transportation, but I look at that plan as a blueprint, and councils over the last 14 years have they implemented $30 million worth of trails and active transportation?
Through the chair, to Mayor Ellis, I don't have that figure right off the top of the head, but they do use the Transportation Master Plan as an example, and the Loyal cycling path. They do use it as a roadmap, and so as those decisions and recommendations come through the department, they follow those plans and recommend the highest priority projects within those plans for council's consideration in the budget year.
So I guess if I'm understanding everything, if the chief brings, say, a new ladder truck for Ward 2 in the next budget or in the next 2 budgets, who ultimately decides if the chief is going to get that truck? And that truck would be a part of our capital budget, would it not? That council?
Through the chair to Mayor Ellis, that's correct, yep.
So if
would
council
be
did
doing
not want to
approval.
approve that, then that would be, what, delayed? Could be scrapped totally?
It would be at the discretion of council.
So council could say the increase is going to be too much in taxes this year. We delay that in the fire master plan?
Through the chair to Mayor Ellis, that's correct. Each year through capital budgeting, we do usually have a fair amount of needs that usually exceed the available financing. So we prioritize and move things to deferred to another year where that risk can be tolerated.
So going back to the new 2 fire halls, if we prove that in the asset management plan, are we going to have to build them eventually?
Through the chair, eventually there will need to be considerations made and decisions at the council level as to the replacement and rehabilitation of those stations in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mayor Neil Ellis. Councillor Enright Miller.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, everybody. As everybody can see, this is a very passionate topic. And I just have some thoughts that I'd like to share, if I could, and then maybe a couple questions, but a lot of good questions have been asked. I'd like to thank the chief and his staff for all the work that's put into the Fire Master Plan to date. And I would also like to thank those residents in Thurlow who reached out with their thoughts and opinions about this issue. And I'm also a Thurlow resident, so the concerns are not lost on me. I've gone back and forth on this issue to support or not support 1 million times over the weekend, and it's a very difficult decision, one none of us has taken lightly, as you can probably see. When you propose any type of tax increase, the impact certainly hurts and gets people's attention. This issue, although seemingly has boiled down to money, in my heart, I feel it's more than that. We cannot lose sight of the fact that these proposed changes, first and foremost, are about saving lives, managing risk, and limiting liability. We all know if a house burns down or even has smoke and water damage, the likelihood of the insurance company not deeming it a complete write-off is highly unlikely. I come from an insurance family, and I've used this already once tonight, to say cars, and my father used to say, cars and houses can be fixed, but lives cannot. Having a responsive fire team is like insurance. You have to continue to pay for it and hope you never have to use it. However, if you do, you sure want to know it's there for you and it's the best it can be. Stats say if you're in a house fire and you start to inhale smoke, if you're not getting enough oxygen to your body to function, depending on the density and heat of this smoke, it may take 2 to 10 minutes to pass or even die. I think the outside window may be 15 minutes, and the chief can correct me on this. This is not a lot of time, and time is of the essence. In my career, I've witnessed firsthand a fire where lives were lost, and I can tell you it's tragic. The Fire Master Plan, amongst other things, is trying to address reaction time and limit that window. I know the chief and staff train regularly to be very responsive and quick in situations, and they know the essence of time. We have allowed urban sprawl in the outer areas of the city, which is fabulous. We need the houses, we need the buildings. We have subdivisions that are tightly packed with homes and townhomes, which is the same model as any city. We're not unique to this. But just because homes are in rural settings does not make them any more fireproof than any other type of structure. It just adds to the travel time. Maybe the building materials being used are more fire resistant and we may gain a bit more burn time, but fire really doesn't care where it starts and where you're located. All it would take is one life to be lost, which would be one too many. As we continue to grow and build out in the rural areas and expand our city, we will continue to have the same issue arise and the same debate time after time. I am not a firefighter. I have to rely on our experts, like our chief and staff, which we entrust our day-to-day service and responsibility to keep us safe. I believe that accepting the fire safety plan as written is probably in our best interest, but I have a question, if I may, and it may go to our CAO. If we do accept it tonight as written, what precludes us from then having the committee meet and look at it and coming back maybe with some revisions after the fact with the boundary issue or with the staffing issues or something? Is there anything?
Through the chair to Councillor Enright Miller. No, I don't think there's anything that would stop that from happening. I mean, the chief has laid out his recommendations. They're not going to be implemented overnight. They're going to take time, and in many cases, they're going to take years. And there's certainly, I think, a role that the committee could play in that he can bring recommendations that he's working towards implementing to the committee to get feedback that could involve more than the committee. It could involve the public again if it's a specific issue. And then you know, that committee can provide their opinion to council. That's their role. They're an advisory committee to council. They can provide their recommendation or support of whatever the chief is working on, if it happens to be something that's coming back to council for final approval, whether that be, you know, as big as moving Fire Hall 2 or replacing Fire Hall 4 or any of the smaller recommendations that are in there.
Thank you. Could I ask the chief a question too? If we were to accept it as is tonight, would you have any problem then working along with the committee, or if anything needs to be tweaked at some time, would you be open to that?
I've been quite clear, sorry, through the chair to Councillor Enright Miller. Yeah, no, I absolutely will work with any members of council moving forward. That's what this is all about. I think we would need a mandate change for that committee. That committee was originally designed for a previous core service review. So there's a lot of gray area around that I think would need to be cleaned up with a clear mandate for that committee to carry on. The committee looks actually different than it did previously. So right now the committee is made up of 3 members of council. Previously it was members of council and public. So it's already different from the last time around. And so should it carry forward, absolutely, I'd be willing to work with committee, but I think we would have to have clear mandate on what was expected of staff and what the outcome of that committee would be.
Fair enough. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Enright Miller. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would request the recorded vote on the main motion if I could. Got a couple comments, and I got some questions for the chief. This is the first time that the report's been made public in the sense that at a council meeting, so I do have a number of questions. But as I sit here for a length of time, you start to gather history, and you learn a lot as things evolve. And going back to even 2000, right after amalgamation, there's a lot of stick handling that had to be done back then. But interestingly enough, as we talk about the difference in the tax areas, and there's a discrepancy of who's paying for what, and myself and my colleague across the way represent Ward 2, our colleagues all look at us like it's our fault. Like, you're not paying enough. This is all a discrepancy here that, see, this needs to be fixed. What's interesting is that it was actually in June 19th, 2014, that a resolution was passed that, in accordance with the Director of Fire Emergency Services, the elimination of coincidental response area and establishment of an urban and rural response zones, and that the coincidental response area be eliminated, and that council establish urban and rural response zones at that time. And interestingly enough, the mayor then is the mayor here today, but the council of the day did nothing in relation to the taxes, which would have probably been nice to dovetail at that time. And then it's just been kicked down the road ever since. So just interesting to see where history continues to evolve and come back to us. I do have some questions for the fire chief before I get to my comments, and through you, Mr. Chair, to the chief. In the Bear report, which is the current master plan, page 58 talks about, there's an observation number 8, and it says the ability to assess the effectiveness of the current volunteer response model effective response force was not possible. The response data provided did not include the number of firefighters that arrive on scene. And I guess my question is why is the data collection so poor for the volunteer stations? And what about status messaging that I understand our firefighters utilize, as well as data on a responding app that I understand our firefighters also utilize? So I know there's technology out there. Is that being used in terms of actually data management? And if not, why is the data collection so poor as observed by the consultant?
Through the chair to Councillor Carr. One of the issues is, to be quite honest, and I don't want to place blame, but I wasn't here during that time. I can't speak to a lot of the data collection that happened previously. Some of it I know it wasn't being captured in the incident reporting because it was never requested of. It was not something that was being tracked at the time. I can tell you that since we started working through this process, the consultants early on identified while they were doing their one-on-ones and their group sessions with all staff, they said, hey, you really need to get on top of this. We're doing that now. So yes, we absolutely do have status messaging. We use an app called Who's Responding. Our personnel use it all the time. We've even spread it out across to both urban and rural resources. We're all using it. So we are now tracking how many responders are going. It actually allows our volunteers, should they turn on GPS on their personal cell phones, we can actually see how far out they are from the hall, so we know, oh, you know what, we're going to need to dump another station, or we're going to need more resources, or you know what, it looks like we might be okay. Or the driver of the apparatus can wait another 30 seconds because somebody's right down the street. So we are tracking that now. One of our deputies is actually tracking as well. We have our volunteers, once they jump in a truck, they're messaging how many are on board each one of the apparatus. So we are doing that now. We have that data. We've been collecting it since March. You know, do we have a lot of it? No, but we are collecting it for sure.
Thank you. So I guess the next question would be would not accurate and perhaps improved response times be important consideration when developing a fire master plan? Because if you really want to know where your gaps are, not having data is not the right gap. Having data to then say, I'm going to move so I can see you, through you, Mr. Chair, that the data would then prove or corroborate the assertion, but in this instance, we don't have data, but you're drawing, essentially, the master plan is drawing conclusions on the lack of data. So why wouldn't we want accurate data? So you've started in March. Why wouldn't we look for a window of time in order to get the data that we need to then turn around and say, okay, now we know legitimately we have gaps and we're not just guessing or anecdotally coming up with we have problems when there's nothing to corroborate it.
Through the chair to Councillor Carr. I can tell you when we say we don't have the data, there is other data we can pull. So when a consultant does their reports, we pull information out of our information systems. We use a database called Crisis. And it can pull certain things where it makes it easier for them to formulate their decisions, formulate their spreadsheets. We do have data on numbers of volunteers that are attending the scenes. So we do have a significant amount of data. We run an attendance sheet after every single incident, every single training event we have. We know how many people are getting there. And in just discussions with staff, we know how our responders work. We respond to calls as well. We know that the majority of time we are not filling the trucks. We know how many seats there are per truck as well. And then we look at the delayed response times to know whether or not we're hitting that effective response force or not. So if we know that we've only had 2 trucks arrive on scene, and we know that in general terms, our volunteers are responding with onesies or twosies, we're not hitting that effective response. So although we don't have that critical hard-lined data through our Who's Responding app or the spreadsheets that one of our deputies is creating, we do know through discussions, through attendance review, that we are not hitting those effective response forces.
So with respect to, through you, Mr. Chair, with respect to mustering that's occurring at the stations, has it been looked at in terms of, because at the end of the day, you need a vehicle and equipment, you've said that to me, that needs to be at the scene in order to appropriately respond. That's a given. Firefighters showing up without equipment is not effective. So it's important that that truck or then that vehicle and that equipment moves. Has there been consideration given in order to improve response times for the volunteers where the truck moves and then the firefighters respond once the truck is moving, and we all have the ability to communicate, and it sounds like your members are communicating as they're responding, to get the equipment where it needs to be and knowing the firefighters are coming. So for example, on Station 3, there's a fire in Point Anne. Is the expectation that the firefighter has to muster at Station 3, drive by Point Anne to get on a truck to then turn around and go the other way, or meet there so the truck can come and actually get there quicker, so you have equipment and volunteers showing up at the same time, which ultimately at the end of the day would improve response times?
Through the chair to Councillor Carr, so that is actually how we are responding right now. Not all of our volunteers are going to the hall. Some of them are not qualified to drive yet, and again, that goes back to the quick turnover that we have. So we do have volunteers that are going directly to the scene. Some of the issues with that are they arrive, and if they happen to arrive first, they're there without any equipment, and the public expects us to do something, and it's very challenging to deal with that. And that's no different than anywhere across the province. I've been in many other departments where volunteers were allowed to respond directly to the scene. It places them in quite a predicament when they are alone and don't have the proper resources to start work, and then the public is yelling at them. Additionally, on top of that, because we do struggle with having trucks respond, we do encourage our staff to respond to the hall. Get to the hall and make sure the trucks can go. We also do try to get as many of our firefighters on an apparatus before it leaves as we can, so that when they arrive on scene, they're there in numbers, they can get to work right away with the tools that they have. One of the challenges that we have right now with the model with our volunteers is that they all do actually carry their bunker gear with them. So it's in the trunks of their cars, it's in the back of their pickup trucks. I have talked about it with council, as many other chiefs. You've seen the stuff online about firefighter cancers. We're doing everything we can to protect our staff. And when I brought forward a report earlier in the year to replace our rural rescue trucks, that was so that we could get their bunker gear out of their cars and their trucks, away from their families, away from themselves, and get them into the stations so that their equipment is there. So we truly do want them getting to the hall, getting their equipment. If they end up showing directly to the scene, then their gear will be waiting for them when that rescue truck arrives. But truly, we're trying to get as many people into the apparatus as possible to get them there as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. I've got a couple more questions, Mr. Chair. Just with respect to the third engine company that council pulled from the report initially, you identified that as a risk management tool to go right across the city. That's not area rated, but core service. Everybody pays it regardless of where they reside. How much of an impact does that have in terms of addressing initial response, particularly in the areas that are growing north of the 401?
Through the chair to Councillor Carr. So obviously it's going to have an immediate impact, and it's going to be a benefit right away, no matter what the emergency is. When we look at a medical emergency, obviously we don't need as many resources on scene to deal with those. If it's a fire, that initial pumper can show up, and they can connect to a hydrant, and there's a few different things that they can do, but they still don't have enough resources to get to work in order to try and perform an interior attack. So what council has to look at, and when you consider risks, is we are a full-service fire service. That means that if safe to do so, we will do an offensive attack. If not safe to do so, we stand outside. It's a surround and drown, and we won't make entry. So absolutely, will it help? It's going to help for those car accidents. They can get to work right away. A crew of 4 can do wonders. It's going to help for the medical emergencies. The public service calls, absolutely. When it comes to a structure fire, there's many more resources that are required. So when we look at resources that are required for a single-family dwelling, we're looking at numbers in the urban area. It's roughly 17. There's 17 taskings that are assigned to people. In a rural area, it goes up to 21. And when I say rural, I mean non-hydranted areas, and that's due to water supply. As soon as an aerial is brought into the equation, if it's an urban area and we require an elevated device, those numbers go from 17 and beyond. And then when we hit high rise, we actually don't meet the NFPA standards here right now. That number is actually 43. And that's why you see, and when we have a significant event, I'll send an email out saying we had a general alarm. That's when we call in all the resources that we have.
How many communities are, through you, Mr. Chair, how many communities our size are meeting the FMPA standard on response?
Through the chair to Councillor Carr, I don't have that information.
Is our comparables meeting that standard?
I don't have that answer.
Okay, that's fair.
I can add to that.
Yep.
It's something that we strive for. It doesn't mean that I'm saying we have to meet it. It's what we strive for as the industry best practice.
So you don't have to meet it?
No, I've made that clear. So
Okay.
we don't have to. It's the standard that's been adopted by the fire service, and it's something that we strive for as an industry best practice.
Okay. Two more questions, Mr. Chair. The 2019 POMAX report, and I guess this is where I have the benefit of being here and have a little bit of the history and have read that report. That report says that there was adequate staffing by census tracking data based on a population count of 52,000 in 2024. The new report, the BEAR report, says the city needs 24 more staff above its current 56 suppression personnel. That's an almost 50% staff increase for less of a 10% population increase. What is Cornwall, Welland, North Bay, and Quinte West doing as those populations are comparable when we see what these two contrast reports have?
Through the chair to Councillor Carr, I don't have all the information on all of the municipalities he listed. I can speak to Welland. Welland is growing similar to Belleville. Welland is instituting additional staffing to meet the needs of their municipality. So they are bolstering their resources within suppression, and they have added personnel. The city of Quinte West, although they are our neighbors, I would not consider them as a comparable when looking at urban fire suppression, and quite honestly, I wouldn't want to speak to how they're doing things there. This is what we've rolled out here and what our recommendations have brought forward.
Okay,
They presently do not have a master plan.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question, then I just have a few remarks. On page 52 of the Fire Master Plan, 3.5.1 talks about service interoperability and efficiency. I want to just read a little bit of, just as a prelude to my question. It says, as previously identified, the current Belleville Fire Emergency Services delivery system has critical deficiencies. And it goes on to basically say that it operates as two separate fire services. This unusual arrangement, while not totally unheard of, results in duplication and fragmentation of services where the public may not be well served. And then it talks about amalgamation and some of the patchwork that's gone on in terms of who's responding and all the rest of that. I'll save that one. But observation number 6 says there's several longstanding critical deficiencies that need to be addressed in order to improve interoperability between urban and rural response. The Belleville Fire and Emergency Services, to establish itself as fully integrated, is understood there are several complexities. The amendment of the fire protection taxation rates for urban and rural service will be challenging public issue that will require extensive public consultation and communications. And interestingly enough, if it wasn't for Councillor Brown putting the motion forward for public consultation, that wouldn't have occurred. The no contracting out provision in both the International Association of Firefighters and CLAC collective agreements will be a labor relation issue requiring a negotiated resolve. Under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, Council essentially has the overall responsibility to establish a level of service for the municipality. The operation under the current structure of a rural and urban area has become more cumbersome to provide an effective and efficiency service. The updating of these various response areas to achieve the desired performance and service levels are critical, and it talks about that the chief's leadership and resiliency will be required. So I guess the question is, and there's a theme through here where it has to come together. Council sets the level of service. If we want a fully integrated service, how do we achieve this? I guess this is the issue when you got the fire department in the public gallery and an alarm goes off.
Through the chair to Councillor Carr, how do we achieve an integrated fire service, I believe?
Yes.
That's the question?
Given the issues and the collective agreements and things that are clearly outlined that we know have been an issue for decades, how do we move beyond that so we have the fully integrated service that you've suggested through this plan that we're going to achieve?
I can wholeheartedly say we're on our route there. So through the recommendations that are before you today and the things that we do every single day, the things that we work towards, whether it's our management team or whether it's our staff within the full-time ranks or the volunteer ranks, we're all working together to integrate our service. And I would say it goes even beyond that. Integrating our service, it's our emergency management group as well. It's other city services. Previously, a position was approved through our works department for a mechanic, and that's going to be a fleet mechanic that will be shared through fire services. So it goes beyond how we integrate our service level from just fire services. Other things that we're doing joint training initiatives. Prior to now, there was very little joint training initiatives. I can tell you in the last couple of months, there's been 3 occasions where our full-time staff have gone out to the rural area. One of the things we identified is during a general alarm, we'll bring our volunteers into town to make sure that we provide coverage to the city as a whole. They were coming in here without proper training on how to deal with high-rise emergencies. You can imagine that's quite daunting, and honestly, we were setting them up for failure. We have sent our specialized trainers in high-rise emergencies out to the rural area, and we've started the awareness training. That's step 1. We've done things such as ice and water rescue training. So we identified we were lacking in proper training in ice and water rescue in the rural area. Our full-time staff, we have very, very strong trainers in ice and water rescue. They have implemented training with those staff. Standardized SOGs. How do we integrate our service? Have one set of standard operating guidelines. We presently have 2. The rural standard operating guidelines are completely outdated, and I will say that there was no effort put into those previously. We're changing that. We are updating them so that we have one set of standard operating guidelines for the entire departments. Obviously, urban will have some specific to them when it comes to things like aerial devices, and our rural team will have things specific to them such as tanker shuttles. But we are working on one set of guidelines to unify us as one department. Just as simple as this master plan, we brought both associations together so that we could work together through this and explain it and allow them to voice their opinions. I can further say that we're utilizing things like new applications. So I talked a little about who's responding. We have other scheduling programs that we use. We have other devices that we use for our equipment checks, routine maintenance. We're rolling that out department-wide, not just specific to one side or the other. So we're doing things that we can integrate our services. Our platoon chiefs, it's a new role. They have gone out, they continue to go out. Our captains are going out on training nights to meet with our rural staff so they can get to know each other. They can learn each other's capabilities. And I can tell you throughout this summer, they'll be doing more training. So the third pumper, that's already been passed. We'll be utilizing pumpers that will be going into the rural area. Some of our staff have not drafted water for rural water supply in a long time. They will be working with our rural resources to do that refresher training and to make sure that they're good to go. So those are things that we're doing and we will continue to do in order to integrate our service.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for your responses, and I certainly appreciate your leadership. I know you and I have had a number of conversations leading up to this as this is developed, but I think it was important to pose those questions publicly. Mr. Chair, I just got a few comments.
Sure.
So if I could, and just, you know, amalgamation has brought many positives, including Thurlow bringing forward a volunteer fire service, providing effective fire protection, and proving also to be cost-effective to the taxpayer. One of my initial council terms between 2000 and 2003, the fire union at the time was actually conducting time trials into Ward 2 to bolster their case for urban expansion. I remember asking the fire chief at the time who was running the department. And that subsided after a while, but the full court press continued. And then I spoke about the 2014 changes to the response boundaries, which was prior to my time, and the council of the day didn't touch anything in related to the taxes that are associated with it, and now it's a problem here today. Fast forward to the previous city council term, the Pomax report, June 2019, was completed with a price tag to the taxpayer of $70,000. One recommendation came to council, and I have minutes from that meeting of August 26, 2019. It was actually myself that moved it, and Councillor Millette seconded, where that we would have the Pomax Core Services Review be released for public distribution, and that a terms of reference be established for a Protective Services Advisory Committee. That was the only one that came forward from, there was no recommendations at all that were brought forward from City Council. In fact, as I do a little research and Google that report and our history, I do see that the consultant's report was actually critiqued by the BPFFA, and it's on their website where they got a third-party review. Needless to say, it was not favorable as far as they were concerned. And yet, then again, the consultation report was then shelved. Perhaps maybe, and it could possibly look like for a political endorsement, but nonetheless it was shelved, and that $70,000 has moved along. We here today, as we're developing this master plan, have not looked back at that report or even to look at the two in comparison and to come to a Belleville conclusion. So fast forwarding to the Bear report, which is the current consultant, January 2024, it was completed with a price tag to the taxpayer of $101,000. The consultants met with two members of the Protective Service Advisory Committee, that was myself and Councillor Alsop, in January of 2023, to do an overview of their timeline to conduct the review and provide the master plan, and fire management was there. Other than the mayor, no members of council were interviewed or provided a survey to give input. This is contrary to every other master plan that has come through here, and I know that the mayor has referred to other master plans. We've all been contacted by the consultant or sent a link from a staff member to say, the consultant wants to speak with you. You're representing the community. We need to hear from all 9 of you around the table. That wasn't done. Interestingly enough, there doesn't seem to be any critique from outside groups regarding this report. I know that I've even had some attention at our ward meeting in terms of outside groups attending to see what's what. The Protective Services Advisory Committee never met with fire management or the consultants again after that January meeting. And the Protective Services Advisory Committee never saw a draft copy of that master plan. And I know that there's, I guess, some discrepancies perhaps because the master plan, or sorry, the terms of reference talks about Pomax, but there are other things that are outlined in that terms of reference that remain valid. I did get confirmation from the city clerk that those terms of reference are the ones that are in play as of today, but yet we didn't see that through that committee. The report and the master plan was actually sent to members of council with a confidential briefing note to review, and if we had questions to pose those to the chief. The report was formally introduced with a recommendation to endorse the plan during an in-camera session without public consultation. And I refer back to the consultant's report that said, given the interoperability issues and the patchwork of responses and the 2 collective agreements, that there needs to be significant consultation with the public. And so I guess the question is why the rush? Why the lack of visibility? You know, it was funny, it was even suggested to me that I shouldn't be alerting my constituents and that this should just proceed. And, but my job here is to represent others, so I'm always going to inform my constituents. I'm going to tell them of what we're facing, and that's the premise behind the town halls and other forms of communication. There was talk about the third engine company, and we pulled that for a reason, because we knew, based on what the chief was telling us, that there was a concern with response times. Now, we don't have a lot of valid data, so it's anecdotally, but the chief made a valid argument that this was a risk that needed to be mitigated, and we took on that plan, which adds to the complement of firefighters. At the same time, we continue to see a depletion of our volunteer firefighters as we see an increase of full-time. The consultant's report notes that there have been ongoing recruitment and retention challenges with the volunteer firefighters, but there's no articulated plan to change that. And even today in this plan, there's nothing in there. I know the chief has spoken to some things that they're doing, but really and truly, there needs to be an aggressive plan in order to not only attract, but how are we retaining them? And I recognize this environment is difficult to work in and hard in terms of other responsibilities, but it's done in other communities. The BFES, or the Belleville Fire and Emergency Services org chart in the consultant's report, shows career at 44 firefighters in January 2024. The chief has provided me with some org charts. In June of 2024, the career firefighters went to 48, the volunteers at 32. The org chart that's going to be in effect come January 2025 shows career firefighters at 60, volunteers at 32. That number's not moving. At the end of the day, public service salaries, and particularly those related to emergency services, and let me correct that, police and fire, because I don't think EMS is in that category, not based on the list we see of salary, continually rise, and council should be looking at trying to balance the public safety and cost containment. And now I know there was reference to some capital things that we're going to have to do, and of course, we're going to have to invest in buildings. Our asset management plan calls for that. Where we really see runaway costs is salaries. And as we see this continual encroachment in urbanization and adding to those numbers, forget about Ward 2. Across the city, the taxes continue to go up. And we face outside pressures. Next year, we've got the mayor's health tax on yet again. We're all fighting this hard variable here in terms of keeping the money down. So why is we as a city council who represent the taxpayer not look at cost-effective options versus pushing forward this plan with the clearly articulated ever-increasing budgets? Under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, City Council has the sole authority to set a level of service, yet successive city councils have danced around this issue because of the unions. From coincidental response to its elimination to separate response zone, this has to stop. The city has not had a negotiated settlement with BPFA since 2002. This is public knowledge. Arbitrated decisions, which are not initiated by the city, has cost the taxpayer enormous amounts of money through legal bills and consequential settlements. We have to contain costs. So unfortunately, the no contracting out clause has handcuffed the taxpayer and the cost-effective service that has been provided for the entire city. And we have a responsibility to the taxpayer as we deliberate in this place. The full-time budget is $15 million. The volunteers is just over $1 million. The consultant's report is one piece in a collection of information, and we should be considering all of it. After hearing from my constituents, whether by email, social media, or the town halls that we have had, I cannot support the motion today. It's unfortunate that we couldn't take a more deliberate approach to this plan.
All right, thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Alsop.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and appreciate the opportunity to weigh in on this. I want to first thank the Chief and all the members of Belleville Fire and Emergency Services for being here tonight, as well as my fellow councilors, because this is a very important plan, and we've had a lot of very healthy discussion about it, very thorough back and forth amongst directors and councilors, and I think that that's important for a plan that is as important as this one is. I think that the root of this gets to two issues, one being public safety and the safety of our members who are going out on the trucks, and the other one is general fairness. From a safety standpoint, we need to be doing what we can to make those standards more realistic, to get more people with equipment to areas where we need emergency services, and I think that this plan does a lot in terms of getting us closer to those goals. On the basic fairness side of it, let's address the other one first. On the safety component of it, we had the Chief mention that there is a volunteer firefighter who routinely is by themselves when they're responding to calls. That's not acceptable. It's not acceptable from an effective response standpoint, and it's not acceptable from a safety standpoint, both for the resident that is in an emergency situation and that firefighter as well. So that needs to be addressed. On the fairness component, I take a little bit of umbrage with one of the statements that was made previously, that some of the Ward 1 councillors are looking at the Ward 2 councillors in terms of the discrepancy here between what's being paid and what's being received, and that we are saying that we're being ripped off or something to that effect. I don't think that's the case at all. I do not feel that Ward 2 councillors have somehow masterminded this plot to save themselves $23 a year, or in the worst case scenario for Campton rural moving to urban, $67 a year. I certainly don't feel that way, and I don't think any of my other colleagues feel that way. But to the mayor's point, if a service is being offered and it's not being paid for, someone is paying for that. And I've certainly learned over the course of my life that there is no such thing as a free lunch. If you're eating, somebody has paid for it. And that's the situation that we have here. Now, when you look at the proposed tax decrease for Belleville Urban and Campton Urban, we're talking about $11 a year. No one is trying to jeopardize the safety of the whole community or pit Ward 2 against Ward 1 over $11 a year. And if ever there's an issue in Ward 2 that requires additional service, and for the lack of my $11.62, I'll write you a check. Moving forward from that, when we look at the report, and we've got the Fire Master Plan recommendation and costing, when we go through and look at the costing figures, establish a platoon chief position of each of the 4 platoons requiring an addition of 4 career positions. We've already approved that. It's already completed. $782,000 in 2024. We go down to establish a 3rd engine company by increasing the career staffing by 16 firefighter positions. We've already approved that. We go down, I'm going to skip over the NG 911 because I do have a question related to that later on. But then we look at the expense related to replacement of fire stations. We've done that through our asset management plan. So what is the great amount of cost that's being increased here that we haven't already agreed to and accepted? I don't see it anywhere in this costing, and I didn't see it anywhere in the report. We have fundamentally agreed to all of these things previously, but now it's on the table, and for some reason there's an issue with it. I'm not quite sure why. Now, one of the drawbacks to going last is I had about 12 good questions, and 10 of them were already asked, so I might have 1.5 good questions left. So I will, through you, Chair, if you wouldn't mind, to Chief Smith. We talk about Belleville Fire and Emergency Services, and a lot of the discussion tonight has been focused on fire. Can you talk to me about some of the other emergency services that are undertaken by your firefighters, and to what degree the response time is important in those situations as well?
Through the chair to Councillor Alsop. We're a full-service fire department. Our establishing regulating bylaw that is approved by council, it's a level of service that you at this table set. Right now, it's a little bit outdated, and one of the recommendations is that we update that. But we're not just a fire department. We do motor vehicle collisions. So we're there for extrication. We're also there to assist our partners in EMS with medical triage. We go to medical emergencies. As a first response, typically that's because we can get there a little quicker than our EMS partners prior to them doing transport. So we're doing life-saving again in that atmosphere. We do hazardous material response as well, so the City of Belleville has a number of industries around the area. Obviously, if we can't mitigate quickly, it can cause issues to a large mass of people quite quickly. We do ice and water rescue. We get a little bit into trench rescue from kind of the land and confined space as well. So we do a lot more than just fire, and then when natural disaster hits, we step in there as well. So we're assisting our works department with clearing roadways. We're assessing down hydro wires and assessing the safety of our public through those means. Sandbagging during flooding times. So kind of overarching all the other emergencies that might come through, we're there to help. We're also there to help our partners in EMS and policing, however they may need us. Sometimes it's as simple for the police as just entry into an apartment, entry into a home. We can do forced entry for them. Again, that could be someone that is potentially harming themselves or another, so it could be life or death in those scenarios as well.
Thank you, and I think that's important to realize as well, because when we talk about response time, it's not just if your house is on fire or your neighbor's house is on fire. It's opioid crisis, it's hazardous materials, it's industrial accidents, car accidents, water and ice rescue, all of these other things that also have a component of response time, which will be crucial. So it's not just about the smoke inhalation, whether it's a couple minutes or 10 minutes, it's all of those other things as well that we need a full complement and available bodies and available equipment to make those rescues and to save people's lives and keep our community safer. So moving on from that, my next question relates to recommendation 10 that references NG 911. And I'll just read it out here. The City of Belleville initiates a project to upgrade the Communications Services Center to NG 911 and hire 13 communications operators, or alternately contract the dispatch and communication service to an accredited third party. Do you have the costing figures for what we would have been looking at to incorporate NG 911 from a technological standpoint, as well as a staffing standpoint, and what the savings were by outsourcing to Peterborough, and then how that interplays with our ability to get new boots on the ground to assist with response time?
Through the chair to Councillor Alsop, I'm going to talk a little bit while my partner to my left here pulls up some spreadsheets. So with NG 911, absolutely a huge cost savings for us. So we have moved on to the City of Peterborough. I think our first year was around $363,000 for the first year of the contract. What the savings were There's savings, but then there was also reallocation of costs. So I'll talk a little bit about the reallocations until Director Ferguson can have the exact data ready. So when we looked at reallocation, when I brought that report forward to council, when we said, you know what, it's time to get out of the dispatch business, we said, where do we need our resources and really what's the priority? So we had our 4 junior firefighters. When we were hiring hiring full-time firefighters, the first stop was in dispatch. No, not one of them was trained as a dispatcher. Not one of them was certified as a dispatcher. That's just step one before they could get on the trucks. So ultimately what we looked at as one of the ideas and was brought forward and supported by council was to take those junior firefighters, put them on the floor, put them on the trucks. So that was step one in moving towards that third pumper apparatus in order to have enough staff. So that was a little bit of the reallocation of some of the resources. And if I could, do you want me to turn it over to you? Yeah, I can do that, it's easier.
Through the chair to Councillor Alsop. When we were looking at the costing, there was the upfront capital costing, but there was also operating costing. As you can see, the staffing complement required to run that service was quite extensive. We had that estimated at operating expenditure about $2.4 million. You know, having said that, we would be looking at also having dispatching customers if we still had that, if we were to have provided that service. So we would have estimated, again, thinking that we would get some recovery from those groups at about $1 million of annual operating costs, contingent on you know, recovering 1.4 from other dispatch customers if they would allow us to provide that service to them.
Great, thank you. I think that's important to note as well, that in that one decision alone, we're able to reallocate a number of resources to actually getting people on the streets, boots on the ground, response times better, and then saving a running cost of about $1 million a year if we were successful in outsourcing contracts of $1.4 million a year. If not, we would have been looking at a $2.4 million hit just on that one decision. And so when I look at ways that we can improve our service and ways that we can save money, that one is one that sort of flew under the radar. There hadn't been any discussion on it tonight. That was a big component in allowing us to do these other things that keep our community safer. And in terms of the quality of the dispatch, any issues with that?
Through the chair to Councillor Alsop, absolutely not. It's been a smooth transition. The city of Peterborough actually operates very similar to the way we operated, just on a very much more robust system. There's been no issues to this date. They're doing a phenomenal job. They did a capital project that's been going on, I think, for at least 4 years, maybe longer, to upgrade our radio infrastructure. And there was a lot of back and forth with Peterborough to get that online, and they've been fantastic to deal with.
Great, thank you, Chief. So no reduction in service, millions of dollars in savings. I think we're running a pretty good program over there, if you ask me. So further to that, as I pointed out, I think it's an issue of fairness, but more importantly, it's an issue of safety. And recorded vote or not, I'm always going to stand on the side of community safety, and so if anyone likes, they can write that down. Thank you very much, and I look forward to supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Alsop. I'd like to say a few words, so Councillor Thompson.
Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, through you, Chair. For those who are following along on different media sources, and for those in the gallery, I'm sure there are a few that didn't have a chance to look at this fire master plan that we received. So I'll give you some cold notes on it. It's a strategic vision and recommendations for Belleville Fire and Emergency Services over the next 5 to 10 years. The fire master plan has submitted 24 recommendations, varying in different challenges, whether it's fiscal, labor initiatives, and some other things that Belleville Fire Services would deal with. We're talking about the work of Belleville Fire and moving to take Canifton rural taxpayers, shifting to Canifton urban tax table. So that's what, is that correct, Mr. Ferguson? Just so everybody's on the same page, because there's been a lot of conversation today.
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly. Sorry, you moved. That is correct. One of the recommendations would realign the service boundary, so there would be taxpayers that are classified as Campton Rural moving to Campton Urban.
All right, good. So we've reconfirmed that, if you will. So we received our council information on Thursday, our package, and we went through it. And on Friday afternoon, I had a chance to contact the fire chief and just talk about this report that we received. And I took notes during that conversation with Chief Smith. So it's about improving city service with the boundary changes. We're going to an urban area. Public safety is a priority. These are the chief's comments. It's going to be quicker response to whatever the need might be. And when Councillor Alsop talked about it's more than just fires, so true. He talked about being there, service within 4 to 6 minutes. Rural could be anywhere from 10 to 20. It's been 14 years in the making. It's time to move on this. We heard from Mr. Ferguson that the tax increase, confirm it if you can, for those just tuning in, again, just over $5 a month. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Kelly, that would be correct for the rural to urban taxpayer at a $250,000
Thank you.
assessment.
So, one of the things that the chief said tonight on one of his questions was, he said, any given day, we're not sure what or how many volunteers are available. So the question is, how can you run an effective fire service when you don't know who or what time they're going to get there? And I have a lot of respect for volunteer firefighters. You know, my perception of rural, I drove by a couple of times on the weekend, the discussion area we're talking about. And I grew up in a rural community where families had gardens. They dried their clothes on a thing called a clothesline. It's not like that, the area we're talking about in Canifton. So, you know, when you talk to the chief and he talks about just the 670 homes, 73 multi-residential properties, take a drive there, you'll see the growth. And that's, we've heard this for years, that Belleville's a destination now. We see it in our community. If you don't see that, you're not seeing what 99% of us are seeing. The city is growing. Public safety for me is a priority. I didn't get too deep into the weeds about unions and whatnot. So I took a drive there yesterday with my daughter, and I wanted to share this. So the area we're talking about, and when I'm driving there yesterday with my daughter Taylor, all these homes are for sale, the development, the high-rise. And one of the builders is Gertzma. We're familiar with his work. Here's what Gertzma has on their website. Riverstone, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. Gertzma Homes Limited proudly presents Riverstone, our first, second, third, and fourth phase of this great new subdivision featuring detached homes, new urbanism homes. It says it right there. The builders are selling it that way. 2-story townhomes, bungalow townhomes in a great location. I'm going to support this move. Thanks to Chief Smith. It's the right thing to do. Public safety is priority. And I don't look at the city of Belleville as 2 wards, 1 and 2. What's in the best interest for the 58,000 people and who continue to come to our community to live and reside and enjoy many of the benefits that we had. So there's no divide on my part with Ward 1 and Ward 2. It's the right thing to do, public safety number 1. Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? All right, Councillor Thompson.
No, I think everybody said this.
Thank you. We're going to record a vote.
Councillor Enright Miller,
Yes.
Councillor Kelly,
Yes.
Councillor Millet,
Yes.
Councillor Thompson,
Yes.
Councillor Alsop,
Yes.
Councillor Brown,
No.
Councillor Carr,
No.
Mayor Ellis.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, we're going to move on to 8B, consent items. Council may adopt consent items by one motion, but prior to consideration of such motion, members may request that specific items be removed from consideration under such motion, and council shall consider such items individually. And we are going to, consent items might be pulled, and what we're going to do tonight, instead of going around the table from left to right, we're going to go alphabetically. So we'll start with Councillor Alsop.
No, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
No, thank you.
Councillor Carr.
8B4, please.
8B4. Mayor Ellis.
No, thank you.
Councillor Enright Miller.
No, thank you.
Councillor Millet.
8B5, please.
8B5. And Councillor Thompson.
No, thank you.
Okay, so we'll go right down to, okay. That the consent items be approved with the exception of items 8B4 and 8B5. We get a mover? Mayor Ellis, Councillor Millet, all those in favor? Approved. All right, so let's go to 8B4. I think that was Councillor Carr. Was that you that pulled it? All right. Go ahead. Oh, a seconder? Mayor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought you were going to read the resolution, but anyway,
You can go ahead, sir.
Well, no, it's fine. So it has to do with the capital budget survey results, and certainly, again, want to appreciate members of the public who've taken the time to complete the survey. Again, citizen engagement was something that we needed to see as it relates to budget. After all, it is their money. Interestingly enough, just in terms of staff analysis of service levels and what they've received back from members of the public, the majority of respondents were in favor of maintaining taxes, even if it means reducing some discretionary tax-funded services. And then there was a relatively equal split between increasing to an extent that maintains tax-funded services and decrease taxes by reducing discretionary tax-funded services at 22% and 26% respectively. And I guess I want to just highlight the fact that residents are concerned about their bottom line, and so we obviously need to take that into consideration as we develop budgets and we make monetary approvals, which will be a discovery for us when it comes to tax time. But again, thank you to the residents that completed that survey.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? So can we get a motion to get a vote here now? All those in favor? Approved. Thank you. All right, next is 8B5. That was pulled by Councillor Millette, and that is short-term accommodations, STAs, that the Director of Corporate Services Clerk's Report number DCS 2024-09, update short-term accommodations be received. Councillor Millette. Sorry, I need a seconder. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to, I guess, Mr. McDonald's here report. And I know in earlier discussions when we enacted the STA regulations that we assumed that there were a great number of them operating illegally in the city. And I see from the report that according to the statistics, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 38 STA licenses over the 3-year period that the bylaw has been in place. So I'm sure that we are aware, as we always have suspected, that there are a great many more operating. Do we have an estimate of how many we believe are actually operating in the city, a guesstimate even?
Through the chair to Councillor Millette. So as indicated in the report, it's been incredibly difficult to engage a third party to provide that service, to data mine for that number with any certainty. We finally engaged someone. You would think it'd be easy to spend money. It has proved not to be. In doing so, they'll be starting shortly. During the display of their tool, while it was live, we're in the neighborhood of probably 160 to 180. So it was live at that time. Their tool is the one being used by Brighton, Quinte West, and I want to say Kingston or Peterborough. Yeah. So it is being widely used, and it's pretty accurate. So it will be interesting to see. Relatively efficient and cost efficient as well. So look forward to having it in play and coming back to you with accurate numbers and some suggestions as to how to encourage licensing efforts from staff perspective.
Yeah, and I guess, thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. Through you, Chair, just one more point. I know that the concern was these going unregulated and taking up valuable housing stock, which could be long-term rentals, and that's kind of a bugaboo that's driven the Prince Edward County, for instance, to put a freeze on STAs. We're trying to maybe make it a little more palatable, I guess is a good word for them to register. Is that what the impetus is behind the 100-meter separation, maybe removing that from the regulations to encourage more who are sort of flying under the radar to step up and at least let us track them? Is that the idea?
Through the chair to Councillor Millette, it's still, from our perspective, of public safety, public nuisance matter. The license comes with inspection from fire. and building. I think everybody's worst nightmare is what happened in Quebec to a licensed STA that unfortunately on upper floors had no fire escape and no ability to open windows, and there was loss of life in that instance. So certainly that's something we want to avoid here. We want to make sure that they're being used in a responsible manner for safety of the folks that are using them for vacation and tourism perspective. But we also want to make sure that we're not creating public nuisance and engaging bylaw enforcement to go out for noise complaints, parking complaints, garbage, just unkept properties, because that is the offset as well. We're seeing that in the limited licensing that we're doing in some of the tourist areas closer to the waterfront. So it's a whole bunch of things, but public safety is always a concern, and we want to make sure that you're being used responsibly.
Okay, thank you. And just one last point to that. I'm heartened to see, well, certainly we wouldn't encourage removal of any requirements under the Ontario Fire Code or the building code, that sort of thing. But maybe if we can encourage more to get on board, we can better regulate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councilor Millette. Councilor Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question through you to the city clerk. Just in terms of, and it's highlighted in the report here about limited enforcement. So you bring back the report that shows us the actual true number. What do you see the requirement would be in order to actually conduct enforcement?
Through the chair to Councillor Carr, I think, as council might recall, with the transition of bylaw to corporate services, and the hiring of a manager, which is in process with HR, recruitment and the hiring of a manager. I think once case count is under control and bylaw enforcement, which we're hopeful happens in the short, medium term, we'll be able to task that group with licensing efforts, including STA. That's our hope. I think ultimately knowing what the problem is, scope of the problem, so having that count of active STAs in the community, and then introducing administrative monetary penalty, so AMP, for parking, and including licensing STAs in it. The communities that have done that are realizing real compliance. It doesn't clog up POA court. I would like to tell you that we're really making headway with parking in POA court, but we're not. We're lucky to get one court day a year, a month. And you can imagine what that does to the backlog, right? So we're not able to address parking. We certainly would not be able to address backlog of bylaw enforcement. Administrative monetary penalty is in-house adjudication, so that we're able to address them in a timely fashion in-house, so in a room in this building or another city-owned building. And the adjudicator is able to impose fines, payment plans, things of that nature in a very timely fashion. And from a penalty perspective, STAs they're being upheld, and they can increase drastically based on what they're charging. So our neighbors in the county are very wildly successful. If they're charging $500 a night and a minimum of 3 nights, the courts are upholding $1,000 on a first offense, $5,000 on a second, and $10,000 on a third. If they're just ignoring health and safety violation, if it's a health and safety violation, putting people at risk, the courts are saying this is logical to fine people for that, because based on the income, they're willing to put people's lives at risk. And so the courts are saying these are logical fines. Through administrative monetary penalty, you can get them in front of an adjudicator quickly. POA, you can be 2 years or more. And so the courts, by the time you get in front of someone, they're striking them, right? So it's a lot of work for no gain. So that will also help us address it.
Well, thank you for that, and it's certainly good to hear that we're moving on that. You know, these are a lot different than the traditional longer-term lease properties that one would see. Obviously, a short-term rental. It's, again, another example of the financialization of housing, quite honestly. And then the disturbing part is that even with the bylaw in effect, people are finding ways to just simply skirt the rules. And even when you go on some of the platforms, and you could tell what neighborhood it's in, but it won't give the address until you financially commit, simply because they know they're trying to play games with the rules, which is very unfortunate, and obviously it's a gray market that needs to be properly regulated from a health and safety, but also we need to look at making sure that we're not diminishing the housing stock by people trying to make a quick buck. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, and thank you to the clerk's office for the update. Just FYI, Matt and I talk about this on a fairly regular basis, so it's a bit of an irky thing for me. The 160 STAs is a bit disappointing. Certainly the numbers with the dupes in suggest that it could be significantly higher. But all of that said, that still means that with the 38 that are already licensed, there's still 122 out there who are not. That could be almost frightening because we've all talked about it, the public safety aspect, the fact that we have Airbnbs or whatever we want to call them, STAs out there that have not been inspected, even 122 of them. It's sort of a frightening number after the conversation that we just had at length. It also means that there's $120,000 in revenue that is not being captured at the city level. And it also means that for at least 122 of the STAs, they're not contributing municipal accommodation tax in the same way that the 38 who are licensed and the hundreds of hotel rooms across the city that are submitting to the municipal accommodation tax. So really unfairly, the issue is, as much as you don't want to make it just about public safety or just about dollars, is there's 122 STAs in the city who are taking advantage of the tourism that is being drawn here through Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing, through the Chamber, through the use of the events that we sponsor with our municipal accommodation tax, our MAT tax. And I think that it's important that we continue to highlight that there are people out here who are just simply not following the rules on an existing bylaw. I'm really hoping once we actually understand how broad the problem is, and once we get through the bylaws, that not about making it, my colleagues' words, more palatable to become licensed, but I would like to see it as much be as punitive for those who are not licensing and putting people, tourists, who it's important to the city, at risk. Anyway, thank you again, Matt.
Thank you. Councillor Alsop?
Yes, thank you, Chair Kelly, and certainly I'm very much in support of moving forward with this. I'm glad to hear that we've contracted Granicus, which is something we talk about quite a bit at the Bay of Quinte Regional Marketing Board, which I'm very grateful to be able to sit on, and certainly that's a focus for them, not only in terms of, I think we've had a discussion a couple of times, community safety and fairness. We're back there again, right? It's got to be licensed. We have to make sure that, you know, they're up to code, that they've got smoke detectors, CO2 detectors, all those sorts of things present, but also that they're paying in their fair share of MAT tax, as our other accommodation sectors do as well. And I'm certainly not someone who's opposed to the idea of short-term accommodators, but it has to be done in the right way. I mean, it is a driver of tourism in this area if we have a range of hospitality options available, but it has to be done the right way. You know, not every function is suitable to put everybody up in a hotel. Sometimes, whether it's, you know, bachelor parties, golf experiences, things of that nature, you want 6 or 8 people in one location so that you can start your day together, you can go about events together, that sort of thing. And so I think that STAs are a vital part of the overall accommodator mix, but it has to be done properly through licensing with collection and payment of MAT taxes. And so I was very much in support of continuing on that path. And even though the initial results are a little bit disappointing, we would have hoped to have had more than 38 enrolled by this point in time. I think that the software will make a big difference, and we'll see that through Granicus, we're able to effectively scrape all those accommodator sites, get a real picture of what's going on, and then follow up with enforcement, because we want to make sure that everyone's playing within the rules.
Thank you, Councillor Alsop. Anyone else? Okay, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Approved. All right, next we're going to 8C, Council Information Matters. Council may adopt consent items by one motion, but prior to consideration of such motion, members may request that specific items be removed from consideration under such motion, and the council shall consider such items individually. The resolution is that the agenda items be received with the exception of, we'll go around the table, again alphabetically backwards. Councillor Thompson.
No, thank you.
Councillor Millet.
No, thank you.
Councillor Enright Miller.
No, thank you.
Mayor Ellis. Councillor Carr.
No, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
No, thank you.
Councillor Alsop.
No, thank you.
All right, so we need to get a mover. Make a motion now to make this report and accept all on the agenda. Councillor Thompson, seconded by Enright Miller. All those in favor? Approved. Thank you. It's time now for the rise and report. Make a motion, Councillor Thompson and Councillor Carr. All those in favor? Approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly, for a great job tonight. I can say I woke up to your voice this morning, and I fell asleep with your voice tonight, so. But it's bylaw time, so I need a motion for first readings of bylaws 2024-136, 137, 138, 139. Moved by Councillor Enright Miller, Councillor Thompson. All in favor, carried. Second reading and discussion, bylaw 24-136, 137, 138, and 139. Moved by Councillor Alsop, second by Councillor Kelly. Discussion, all in favor, carried. Third and final reading of bylaw 2024-136, 137, 138, 139. Moved by Councillor Alsop, second by Enright Miller. All in favor, carried. Next, we move to new business. Councillor Millet.
Thank you, Your Worship, and apologies to corporate services, I guess, or whomever. It's been brought to my attention, and it's not the first time, but it was just recently today from a resident who has a downtown apartment, and they had a guest who parked on either bridge or front overnight and came out to find a $20 ticket. Can I get a staff report on the ability to, I understand the parking, overnight parking regulations, but unfortunately a good number of people, and a lot of them are visitors to the city, don't understand. Perhaps better signage, better public information, but this individual who brought it to my attention also took a photo of the existing signs that show the hours, and they thought they were okay with that, not knowing that full overnight parking on city streets is not allowed. So perhaps if it's not too costly, if it's too cumbersome, if it's not doable, maybe better signage, but if we could get a report back maybe from whomever adjudicates the parking services, we could see how we might better avoid unhappy visitors to the city. I know that our staff downstairs, and speaking to them, quite often field complaints from people who come to pay these tickets. So if I could, thank you very much.
Okay, we'll send that to the clerk, and that's his department, I believe. Any more new business? I have one here. I need a motion, or I have a motion here that bylaw number 2024-141, a bylaw to approve and authorize the execution of a medical staffing agreement between the Corporation of the City of Belleville and Advantage Medical Staffing Limit, be read a first, second, third time, and finally passed this 8th day of July 24. Councillor Enright Miller, Councillor Thompson, all in favor, carried. Notice of motions, announcements. We'll start alphabetically here with Councillor Millet.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. I would like to proclaim July 22nd as Fragile X Syndrome Awareness Day. Fragile X syndrome is the most common known cause of inherited intellectual disability and the leading known single gene cause of autism. Fragile X occurs when a single gene shuts down, a gene vital to normal brain function. Raising awareness for Fragile X is crucial as it helps to accelerate progress toward effective treatments and ultimately a cure. Last year, 385 locations around the world lit up to recognize Fragile X syndrome on July 22nd. To help raise awareness, the Belleville sign, Bridge Street Bridge, and Fire Station Number 1 Memorial Garden will all be lit teal for the cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Miller. I'll let you go, Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. The City of Belleville would like to proclaim July 21 to the 27th as National Drowning Prevention Week. The mission of the Life Saving Society Canada is to prevent drowning throughout the country. Even one drowning in the City of Belleville is one too many. Most drownings are preventable in a water-smart community, and only through water-smart education and a healthy respect for the potential danger that any body of water may present. And we hope that you enjoy the water and recreational opportunities offered by the water areas in Belleville. The Life Saving Society urges Canadians and residents of the City of Belleville to supervise your kids who are in and around water, to refrain from drinking alcoholic beverages while participating in outdoor water activities, and to always wear a life jacket when boating. And just a couple announcements. I know this weekend it's the Waterfront Multicultural Ethnic Festival. Hopefully the city will come out and enjoy that. Starts Thursday. And I know our colleague and friend and fishing buddy, he took me to my first baseball game years ago, Mr. Rod Bove is retiring, and this is his last council meeting. So I want to thank you for everything you've done for the city. Thank you.
Councilor Thompson.
Proclamation, I would like to proclaim July 8th as 50 days to our Paralympic Games. To recognize and celebrate the contributions that individuals make to the Paralympic Games, the Belleville sign, Bridge Street Bridge, and the fire station on number 1 Memorial Gardens will be lit up red, gold, and violet. Red for Canada, gold for the sports, and violet for disability and inclusion. And I got another very important announcement. As chair of the Transportation Committee, I want to let the residents know that commencing July 16th, 2024, automated speed enforcement will go live in the City of Belleville. Automatic speed enforcement is focused on altering drivers' behavior to decrease speeding and increase safety in our community. This has been in the works for making of 5 years, and I'm proud of the process our committee has taken to get to this point. We use data, metrics, and best practices and experiences from municipalities to determine our needs and make recommendations. Our municipalities have noted that this program increases speed of police officer safety by removing the need to pursue and conduct potentially dangerous roadside traffic stops. And data has shown that 92% of drivers who receive a ticket do not receive a second one, and speeding will reduce significantly within the first month. There are 4 cameras, and they are located on Sydney Street, Colley Street East, Harder Drive, and Victoria Avenue near the YMCA. Remember, speeding is just a traffic ticket. It's a safety risk on our roads, so please slow down. These cameras are going to be enforced, and they will move every 3 months to different locations. And we have the 4, as I say, so we're looking forward to a good response. Hopefully not many tickets, but if it is, the threshold is there. It's preset, so be careful out there. And thank the committee members for assisting in this program. And I want to really thank Director Reed for all his due diligence in this process. He's done an awful lot of work in this one to get it the process the way it's supposed to be. And I just can't thank him enough for all his due diligence. So thanks to the committee, thanks to Director Reed, and look forward to seeing what the response will be. And over a period of time, this will be basically no cost to the city. It's not a cash grab, like people are saying on social media. This is to slow people down. There will be a period of time and it's costly up front, but over a period of time, there's really no cash grab in this. It's realization to save people's lives and slow them down, because this city and other cities is ridiculous for speeding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Your Worship. I know leading up to May 6th, when we made the transit route changes, there was a great deal of skepticism about whether or not it was going to be successful, and a great deal of apprehension across the board in the public about the fact that we were going to destroy the transit system, the public transit system. I'm very pleased to advise that for the month of May and for the month of June, we had record-breaking ridership numbers. We thought in May, with fingers crossed, that it might be just a fluke, but we saw a significant increase, and I'll tell those numbers because they are public. We were averaging about 98,000 riders per month preceding the May change. May came in at 125,000 riders. Typically in June, we would see a bit of a nosedive because everybody's busy, end of school, prom, da-da-da, and then we see it sort of tick back up. I don't have the number per se. I'm going to not share it so we can actually tell Transit Advisory Committee first next week. But again, it was record-breaking compared to May 2023. So I think it's again, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. Thank you to the entire transit staff, from the guys and girls in the office to all the bus drivers on the front line. Thank you for sticking with us. We made this happen, and in fact, it's going to actually improve service here in the city. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Well spoken. Is there anybody else? Okay, I have one here. Oh, does Sean want to go again?
Sure.
I'd like to take a moment during today's meeting to recognize that this is CAO Rod Bovey's final council meeting. Rod has over 30 years of municipal experience, including his role as Director of Engineering and Development Services for the City of Belleville, which he held from 2012 to 2019 before coming CAO. When Rod first joined the city, little did we know the profound impact he would have on our community through his steadfast leadership, unwavering commitment, and unparalleled vision. He has navigated our city through triumphs and challenges alike, including the COVID-19 pandemic and 2 councils, which probably made you go a little bit bald, Rod. Rod has certainly set the gold standard in excellence, his public service to our community. Rod hasn't just managed managers and directed departments. He has inspired, empowered, and motivated others to propel our city forward with collaboration. On behalf of the entire city of Belleville, Rod, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to you for your decades of service, leadership, and friendship. Your contribution has made our city a better place, and your legacy will continue to inspire us all. I'd like to now present you with this retirement certificate on behalf of the city of Belleville.
At least we didn't give him a key to the city. Yeah. We're on to keep him out of here.
So with that, I need a confirmatory bylaw resolution, that bylaw number 2024-140, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on July 8th, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally pass this 8th day of July 2024. Councillor Alstott, Councillor Millette, all in favor? Carried. A motion to adjourn. Councillor Alstott, Councillor Thompson, all in favor? Carried. Thank you, everybody.